The gunshot echoed through the canyon like the crack of divine judgment, and Cole Brennan fell to his knees in the dust. Blood spread across his chest, dark and warm, soaking through his shirt as he looked up at the woman standing 10 feet away. Emma. The woman he'd ridden with, robbed with, loved with every broken piece of his outlaw heart. But the gun wasn't in her hand. It was in the hand of Marshal Dixon, who stood behind her with smoke still curling from the barrel. Emma's face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like horror, or maybe it was guilt wearing a mask. Cole's vision blurred, but he could see the badge glinting on Dixon's chest. He could see the way Emma stood just slightly in front of the lawman, like she belonged there, like she'd chosen that side long before this moment arrived. The pain in his chest was nothing compared to the realization tearing through his mind. The ambush hadn't been bad luck. The marshal hadn't found them by chance. Someone had told him exactly where to be, exactly when to arrive, exactly how to trap Cole Brennan in this God-forsaken canyon with no way out. Cole tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He coughed, and red spattered the ground between them. Emma took a step forward, her hand reaching out, then stopping mid-air as if touching him would burn her fingers. The marshal kept his gun trained on Cole, but his other hand rested on Emma's shoulder, protective, possessive, familiar. And in that gesture, Cole understood everything. She'd sold him out. The woman he'd trusted with his life, the woman he'd dreamed of building something clean and honest with, had traded him for her own freedom, maybe for a fresh start, maybe for a lawman's promise of redemption she could never offer herself. Cole's hand moved to the gun at his hip, more from instinct than intention, but before his fingers could close around the grip, another shot split the air. Not from Dixon's gun this time, from somewhere up on the canyon ridge. The bullet struck the marshal in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying from his hand. Emma screamed, Dixon collapsed, and Cole, bleeding and broken, made a choice that would define his final moments on this earth. He threw himself in front of Emma, just as the third shot came. The bullet meant for her heart found his back instead. Cole hit the ground hard, face first in the dirt, his body covering hers like a shield. Above them, the shooting stopped. Whoever was up on that canyon ridge, probably members of Cole's old gang seeking revenge on the lawman, melted back into the rocks. Emma scrambled out from under Cole's weight, her dress covered in his blood. She turned him over, cradling his head in her lap, and for the first time since the ambush began, tears streamed down her face. Cole looked up at her, his breath coming in wet, ragged gasps. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to curse her, to hate her, to make her feel even a fraction of the betrayal that was killing him faster than the bullets. But all he could manage was a whisper. I know. And then his eyes went dark. Now let me ask you something, friend. If the person who betrayed you was standing in the path of a bullet, would you take it for them? Would you trade your last breath to save someone who'd already buried you? Most folks would say no. They'd call it foolishness, weakness, the final mistake of a man too stupid to know when he'd been beaten. But maybe, just maybe, there's a kind of strength in choosing love over revenge. A kind of courage that only shows itself when everything else has been stripped away. Hold that thought. as we go back to where this story truly begins. Because Cole Brennan wasn't always a dead man walking, and Emma Hart wasn't always a woman with blood on her hands. 2 years before Cole took that bullet, he was riding with the Dalton gang, a crew of outlaws who robbed trains, rustled cattle, and left a trail of trouble across 3 territories. Cole had joined them young, angry, and convinced the world owed him something for the hard life he'd been dealt. His father had been a drunk, his mother had died of heartbreak, and by 16, Cole figured the only honest thing a man could do was stop pretending the world was fair. The gang was his family, the robberies were his purpose, and the wanted posters with his name on them were the only proof he existed. Then Emma rode into their camp one night. She came alone, wearing men's clothes, and carrying a rifle like she knew how to use it. She was running from something. They all were. But she had a fire in her eyes that made even the hardest men in the gang take notice. She said her name was Emma Hart, that she'd been married to a rancher who beat her until she couldn't see straight, and that she'd rather die free than live one more day under his roof. The gang leader, a mean snake named Jack Dalton, laughed and told her she could stay if she pulled her weight. She did more than that. Emma could shoot, ride, and think faster than most of the men in the gang. She became part of the crew within a month, and she became part of Cole's heart not long after that. They'd lie awake under the stars after the others had fallen asleep, talking about things outlaws weren't supposed to dream about. Emma spoke of starting over somewhere far away, maybe California or Oregon, where nobody knew their names. She talked about opening a shop, living quiet, being normal. Cole listened and let himself believe it was possible. With Emma, everything felt possible. They pulled jobs together, watched each other's backs, and slowly, carefully, fell in love in the only way 2 broken people could, by promising each other they'd find a way out of the darkness. But the darkness doesn't let go easy. The gang's crimes got bolder, sloppier. Jack Dalton grew paranoid, convinced someone was feeding information to the law. He started accusing members of being traitors, and one night he shot a man in cold blood over nothing but suspicion. Cole knew it was time to leave. He told Emma they needed to go, just the 2 of them, before things fell apart completely. She agreed. They made a plan to slip away after the next job, a bank robbery in a town called Silver Ridge. They'd take their shares, ride hard for the border, and never look back. But the job went bad. The law was waiting when they arrived, like someone had drawn them a map. Half the gang was killed in the shootout. Jack Dalton took a bullet to the chest and died cursing the traitor he never found. Cole and Emma barely escaped with their lives, along with 2 other survivors. That's when the suspicion started. One of the survivors, a man named Polk, accused Emma of selling them out. He said he'd seen her talking to a stranger in town the day before the robbery. He said she'd been nervous, acting strange. Cole defended her, nearly put a bullet in Polk for even suggesting it, and the matter was dropped. But the seed was planted. Over the next few months, Cole noticed things, small things. The way Emma grew quiet when talk turned to plans. The way she'd disappear into town for hours and come back with weak excuses. The way she flinched whenever Cole mentioned the future. He told himself he was imagining it. She loved him. She wouldn't betray him. Then one night Cole followed her. She rode into a neighboring town and met a man outside the sheriff's office. Cole watched from the shadows as they spoke. He couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. The man was Marshall Dixon, a lawman with a reputation for hunting outlaws like dogs. And Emma was standing close to him, her hand on his arm,
her voice low and urgent. Cole's heart turned to stone. He didn't confront her that night. He rode back to camp and lay awake, trying to figure out what it meant. Maybe she was buying their safety. Maybe she was making a deal to turn in the others in exchange for their freedom. Maybe. But deep down, he knew the woman he loved was working with the law. And sooner or later, that meant the law would come for him. 3 days later, Marshal Dixon found Cole alone in a canyon. Emma was with him, and everything Cole had feared came true in the space of a single gunshot. But here's the part that matters, friend. In that final moment, when Cole saw the bullet coming for Emma and threw himself in its path, he wasn't thinking about betrayal. He wasn't thinking about revenge or justice or all the ways she'd wronged him. He was thinking about the girl who'd lain under the stars and dreamed of California. The girl who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and kissed his scars and made him believe, even for a moment, that an outlaw could be something more than his crimes. He took the bullet because love, even betrayed love, was the only thing he'd ever had worth dying for.
Cole didn't die right away. He had minutes, maybe. Enough time for Emma to press her hands against the wound in his back, sobbing and whispering his name over and over like a prayer that might call him back from the edge. Marshal Dixon, wounded but alive, crawled over to check on him. He looked at Cole, then at Emma, and something in his face softened. Emma's whole body shook as she held Cole. The truth spilled out of her in broken pieces, as if confessing could somehow undo what had already been done. She'd made a deal with Dixon months ago. He'd promised her immunity, a clean slate, a chance to start over without the weight of wanted posters and bloodshed following her forever. All she had to do was help him bring in Cole Brennan and what was left of the Dalton gang. She'd told herself it was the only way out. The Cole was too far gone, too tangled in the outlaw life to ever be free. That turning him in was saving him, in a twisted kind of way, prison instead of a grave. But standing there, with his blood soaking into her dress, she knew the truth. She hadn't betrayed him for his sake. She'd done it for herself, for the future she wanted more than she wanted him. Cole's eyes fluttered open one last time. His hand found hers, weak and trembling. Emma leaned close, her tears falling on his face. He smiled, barely, but it was there, and he whispered 3 words that broke her more completely than any bullet ever could. "I forgive you." Then Cole Brennan died in the arms of the woman who'd betrayed him, having spent his last breath on mercy instead of hate. Marshal Dixon helped him bury him on a hillside overlooking the canyon. There was no trial, no wanted poster torn down in victory, just a quiet grave and a woman left to carry the weight of a forgiveness she never earned. Emma kept her deal with the law. She got her fresh start, her clean slate, her new name in a new town. But she never got California. She never got peace. Because every night for the rest of her life, she lay awake remembering the man who'd taken a bullet meant for her, even after knowing she'd sold his life for her own freedom. Some betrayals can be forgiven, friend, but they can never be forgotten. And here's the lesson Cole's story teaches us. Revenge is easy. Any fool with a gun and a grudge can pull a trigger. But choosing love, even when it's been broken and bloodied and thrown back in your face, that takes a kind of courage most folks will never know. Cole didn't die a saint.
He died an outlaw with blood on his hands and sins on his conscience. But in that final moment, he died proving that even the worst of us can choose redemption, even when the cost is everything we have left. Love isn't about keeping score. It's not about who hurt who first or who deserves what. It's about deciding, in the moments that matter most, what kind of person you want to be. Cole chose to be the man who saved the woman who betrayed him. And that choice, painful as it was, made him more than an outlaw. It made him human. If this tale touched your heart, then don't write off just yet. There are more stories waiting beneath the western sun. Tales of love, betrayal, and lessons learned the hard way. Stories of men and women who stumbled, fell, and found the courage to choose grace over bitterness, even when it cost them everything. Subscribe to Frontier Love Tales, where every story reminds us that love still rides, even across the roughest frontier. And remember, friend, the deepest scars we carry often come from the people we love most. But sometimes healing begins not when they ask for forgiveness, but when we choose to give it anyway. Until the next tale, keep your heart brave and your spirit unbroken.